Have you ever actually stopped to wonder why you buy certain things, eat certain foods, or even vote a certain way? Today, we're exploring the fascinating and honestly sometimes unsettling mechanics of human decision making, nudge theory. Okay, let's dive into this.
Here's the roadmap for our explainer today. First, we'll look at the illusion of control. Then, what a nudge actually is, followed by the nudging toolkit. After that, we'll check out nudges in the real world, explore the dark side of nudging, and finally answer the big question, do nudges actually work?
All right, part one, the illusion of control. Who's really deciding? Let's kick things off by challenging a belief that pretty much all of us hold dearly, the belief that our daily decisions are entirely our own. Are you really making smart, rational choices? We go through our days feeling firmly in the driver's seat, but behavioral economics suggests our sense of total control is, well, something of an illusion.
To get why that is, take a look at behavioral economist Dan Ariely's famous book, Predictably Irrational. He points out that things like expectations, our emotions, and social norms act like these invisible forces that constantly skew our reasoning. The research is crazy. It shows we consistently make astonishingly simple mistakes, literally acting against our own self-interest, simply because these invisible forces override our strict logic. Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman gives us a brilliant framework for this. He splits our brain's operations into two distinct processing systems. System 1, that's your mental autopilot. It's incredibly fast, automatic, relies heavily on mental shortcuts, and is super susceptible to environmental influences. System 2, on the other hand, is slow, reflective, and deliberate. But here's the catch. When we're tired, rushed, or just completely overwhelmed by complex choices, our brain automatically defaults to System 1. And that fast autopilot system is exactly what can lead us to make suboptimal decisions.
Moving on to part two. What is a nudge? So nudge theory was popularized back in 2008 by behavioral economist Richard Thaler and legal scholar Cass Sunstein. Basically, a nudge alters the environment, what they call the choice architecture, to predictably change our behavior. But the crucial part is it does this without actually forbidding any options and without changing the economic incentives. Thaler and Sunstein coined this awesome term to describe it, libertarian paternalism. Libertarian because, hey, you're still totally free to choose, and paternalism because the architects are designing the choices to make you better off. And this brilliantly illustrates the difference between a nudge and a rule. To count as a mere nudge, an intervention has to be easy and cheap to avoid. Nudges are absolutely not mandates. So putting fruit right at eye level in a cafeteria so you're more likely to grab it, that's a nudge. But banning the sale of junk food entirely, that is a mandate. Which brings us to part three, the nudging toolkit. There are three highly common techniques used to nudge our System 1 brains. First up are defaults. This is simply what happens if you do absolutely nothing. For example, people are massively more likely to use renewable energy if it's already set as the default option on their power bill. Second is social proof, which taps into our natural urge to follow the crowd and group norms. And finally, salience. This just means drawing visual or mental attention to a specific option, so it stands out above the rest. Okay, one of the most famous examples of salience actually comes from the men's restrooms at Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam. To solve the gross issue of poor aim and high cleaning costs, authorities literally etched a tiny image of a housefly into the porcelain near the drain of the urinals. And guess what? If you give men a target, they simply cannot resist aiming for it. This tiny, inexpensive change in the environment significantly improved aim and drastically cut cleaning costs, without a single sign or rule being posted. Part 4, nudges in the real world. The truth is, nudging is everywhere. In healthcare, it's used to improve hand washing among professionals to decrease infections. In fundraising, charities use default settings to auto-enroll donors for continuous giving, which heavily increases overall donations. But arguably the most fascinating space is the business and tech world. Companies in Silicon Valley are now engaging in what the Harvard Business Review calls algorithmic nudging. They use AI and massive amounts of personalized data to tweak algorithms in real time, subtly managing our behavior at scale. Definitely something to think about next time a workplace app suggests you take a specific action. Governments have aggressively adopted these strategies too. Back in 2009, Cass Sunstein himself was appointed by US President Barack Obama to a key regulatory office. Then in 2010, UK Prime Minister David Cameron established the Behavioral Insights Team, which was literally nicknamed the Nudge Unit. This idea spread like wildfire globally. New South Wales and Australia created a unit in 2012, followed by the Australian federal government setting up BETA in 2016. Today, behavioral public policy is just a staple of modern governance.
Part 5. The Dark Side of Nudging.
So while Thaler and Sunstein focused on making people better off, these exact same tools can totally be used against us. A dark nudge is a choice architecture designed specifically to manipulate consumers into decisions that benefit the architect, often at the consumer's expense. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the Culver's drive-thru example. They've faced criticism for featuring dark nudges, essentially structuring the visual menu to influence customers into making larger, more expensive, and less healthy purchases. This sparks a pretty fierce debate among ethicists. As researcher Julian Friedland notes, critics argue that covertly nudging people is a real threat to human dignity. They view it as psychological manipulation that slowly undermines our personal autonomy and agency. But on the other side of the aisle, defenders like Cass Sunstein argue that choice architecture is entirely inevitable. I mean, someone has to design the environment, so it might as well be designed to help, right? Plus, some studies, like those by Kellen Mascriva, suggest nudges might actually increase distributive justice. They can disproportionately benefit lower-income individuals who might otherwise lack the financial literacy to navigate incredibly complex choices. Finally, Part 6. Do nudges actually work? For years, early randomized experiments showed incredibly optimistic findings, suggesting nudges were a silver bullet, sometimes even more motivating than just paying people. But the scientific consensus is currently facing a massive reckoning. A comprehensive 2022 meta-analysis by Meyer and colleagues adjusted the historical data to account for publication bias. That's the tendency for scientific journals to only publish the successful experiments. When they adjusted for this bias, they found absolutely no evidence that nudging has any effect on average. Because of this, a lot of behavioral scientists are now pivoting away from the one nudge for all approach, arguing instead that we absolutely must rely on personalized nudging based on individual differences to see any real results.
We've covered the hidden psychological forces, the global adoption, the ethical pushback, and the hard science, which leaves us with this final thought. As you go about your day-to-day, looking at menus, filling out forms, or just scrolling through your phone, now that you can see the architecture, who is really making your choices? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and stay curious.